Welcome to the Homegrown Podcast, a place where we share the truth about food and farming from our kitchen to yours. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today's guest is Sally Fallon Morell. Sally is the president of the Weston A Price Foundation and the author of Nourishing Traditions. She is a woman who truly needs no introduction. We are so excited to have her on the show today. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, as I mentioned before we hit record, I'd love today's episode to sort of be a tell-all on America's biggest dietary failures. And you are the best person to sit down and hash out this conversation with. So I think we should just dive right in. And I would love to hear your perspective on how America has gotten fats wrong in this country.
Yes, well, that's always the first thing I say. If you want to eat a healthy diet, you need to get your fats right, FATS. And the main way, there's many ways, but the absolute main way that we have gone wrong is the substitution for industrial seed oils for animal fats.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been going on since 1913, so over 100 years. And it's a typical advertising ploy to demonize the competition. And that's what they've been doing. They've created a situation where people think it's vulgar to use lard, and that if you're indulgent and you're indulgent and need to feel guilty for using butter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the opposite, the wrong thing to think. Butter, starting with butter, it is the quintessential healthy fat on the planet. It is the fat for the growth and nourishment of all mammals, including humans. There can't be anything wrong with it. And we've found out so many things about butter in the last 20, 30 years that we didn't know before. And the evidence is coming in that saturated fats are not bad, that we need them, and that's why they are put in the butter fat. So that's just number one. Clean out your kitchen, get rid of the cooking oils, the so-called healthy spreads, the margarines, the pan sprays, and any foods containing these. That's just absolutely number one. And don't be afraid of lard. You can get lard from pigs raised outdoors. It's absolutely delicious. It's a wonderful fat for cooking and for frying. And you can have fried foods, but you need to do in the right fat, and that would be tallow. Very stable fat.
Mm-hmm. And what is sort of the origin story behind these industrial seed oils? Where did they really come from?
Yes, so the first industrial seed oil was cottonseed oil, which so cotton was this big industry in the South, and they had all the seeds left, and they wanted to figure out a way to make money off these seeds. So they pressed it in presses and started. The first thing they did was add it to olive oil. So they adulterated olive oil. And they figured out how to make it hard by this process called partial hydrogenation. And it was used in candles. They needed a hard fat for candles, okay? So electricity comes along in the late 1800s, and they didn't have a market for candles anymore. So what did they do? They decided, instead of making candles out of this garbage, we're going to feed it to people. And we're going to mount the advertising and promotion campaign, the likes of which you've never seen before. We're going to get the health professionals, the medical profession to promote this product for us. And so that's what they did. They turned this waste product into something that they advertised for people.
Mm-hmm. I believe it was P&G was one of the first. And I think
it was Procter & Gamble, yes.
Yeah. I think what they did too was created this brilliant cookbook, right, of all the ways you could use their Crisco, and they distributed it for free. And it's like the original content marketing. It was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same old. We've seen this for eggs. They demonized eggs because they compete with breakfast cereals. They demonized raw milk because it competes with industrial milk. That's the way they do it. And until we wise up, we're not going to make healthy food choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What were some of the ways that they could infiltrate convincing the medical community that they should start to
Yes.
influence?
Well, as people started to use these vegetable oils, the rates of heart disease and cancer, but what was most obvious was the heart disease started to rise. And by about 1950, there were 500,000 heart attacks per year, and there had never been heart attacks before about 1920. So this was a new
Wow.
disease. It was an epidemic. And what they do, they blame that on animal fats, not on the likely culprit. And in the early years, the dietitians were saying this. We think this is this new type of fat that you put into the food supply. But those dietitians didn't last long. They basically took over the American Dietetics Association, the American Medical Association, the National Institutes of Health, so that the people that Americans respected were doing their promotion for them.
There was some big funding I've heard.
Yeah.
That was a real reason to kind of sway the sort of public guidelines for fat. And it was in the direction of this seed oil or these quote vegetable oils.
Exactly. And also, the sugar industry was very involved, and sugar consumption was skyrocketing. And they didn't want any, attention on this. So they kind of vectored it away to the fats instead.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we need to realize is the work of Weston Price came out in the late 30s, early 40s. And he was going around the world studying the diets of healthy traditional people. And all of these peoples put a great value on the fats and the fatty organs and all of these sources of vitamins A, D, and K, the fat soluble vitamins. And these fats were sacred in these cultures. Butter, uh, tallow from the animals, the egg yolks, and liver, especially, which is very high in fat, fish liver oil. These, as he discovered that these were absolutely essential for good health and for having healthy babies, the industry doubled down and just kept promoting their product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I love about the foundation is that you guys really explain how Dr. Price's work completely contrasts with the USDA dietary
Oh,
guidelines. And
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
aggravating to
yeah.
see,
And
honestly, how poorly we've been steered, which is why I love this episode.
well, and
Um,
the guidelines, first these guidelines for the low fat diet, no butter, no eggs, blah, blah, skim milk, they were first touted for people at risk of heart disease. So they were touted for middle-aged men who'd already grown and they still suffered from these fats, but at least they had grown and developed normally. But in 1991, they made a big change and they said this, what they called the prudent diet, should be given to children starting at the age of 2. So that's when the pediatricians would say to the moms, well, your baby's 2, so no more whole milk. Don't give them any eggs, certainly not any butter, And, well, this is genocide. It will eventually lead to complete infertility, possibly not in the first generation. But on this diet based on seed oils, each generation gets weaker. And we're on the third generation of this kind of diet. And what are we seeing? Widespread infertility.
mhm,
So I always say we're at the 11th hour. And if we don't change, if some people don't change, there won't be any human race left. And it's not just in
mhm,
America. These oils have infiltrated all over the world.
mhm. Yeah, they're really tricky too because if you are trying to maybe eat organic or you're trying to like read labels, a lot of the organic products at the store still use sunflower
Oh,
oil
yeah.
or canola. It's just organic, right? And
Anything packaged,
it's in there.
anything
Uh,
packaged is just full of it. It's crazy.
Mhm.
well, if it's got a label that has a lot of ingredients on it, you probably shouldn't be eating it. you know.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think the exception would be for traditionally processed foods like cheese and
Yeah.
um, cured meats, if they're done in a traditional way, they're going to have 2 or 3 ingredients. But
Yeah.
if it's got a paragraph like this of ingredients, it's not human food. It's something else.
Yeah. Put it back on the shelf.
I love that. So I just took my daughter to the store and we were going to buy a treat. And she went into the freezer section and found a processed frozen pie. And she's 7 and she was all excited. And she was like, "Daddy, can I have this?" And I was like, "Well, let's just see how well how well we've done so far with our parenting and our schooling." And I flipped that thing around. I said, "Hey, Ruthie, you've made pies with your Nana before, right?" And she said, "Yeah, and I want to get this one because this is the pie I make with Nana." I was like, "Okay." And I read the ingredients to her, and she's looking at me, and she's like, "Daddy, that's not how we make that pie." And she scowled. She's like, "Well, I guess I don't want that one." And we just proceeded to walk through the store reading these things off until we found something that she understood all the ingredients, and she picked that product, came home, head held high, so proud to tell her mom about the, whatever it was that we ended up picking that day.
It was like ice cream made with eggs, cream, maple syrup, and vanilla.
Something like that.
It was so clean.
Anyhow, it was a really fun practice that we did, where it's like, if your 7-year-old knows what these products are, you're probably good to go. But if your 7-year-old doesn't know what they are, you might want to steer clear. So
it's like that show's Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, but for the ingredient label. Okay, so moving on to the next category of where America has gotten dietetics completely wrong. I want to talk about milk. We've covered raw milk at length on this episode, so please, I want to hear all of your perspectives.
Well, that's exactly what I would say. The second thing is to go back to real milk. Real milk is unprocessed, has all the fat in it, comes from grass-fed cows. And the industry has totally corrupted the production of milk. And it's not just pasteurization, it's ultra pasteurization, which came in, 20, 30 years ago. And whereas pasteurization takes the milk to 160 degrees, that's already hot enough to destroy all the enzymes. Ultra pasteurization takes milk to 284 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really hot. And it so warps and distorts these proteins that they become foreign proteins, and allergenic. And there have been studies done on this. There was one from China a few years ago, and what they found is if they gave, any kind of heated milk product, even freeze-dried milk product, to rats, they developed all kinds of problems, and they became stupid. They couldn't do the mazes. They, had affected their memory. And I think if any parent knew this, why would they give a heat-treated milk to their children? Do you want your kids to be stupid? And we know that this is what happens. So the other thing that they never talk about, and they say, "Oh, raw milk is so dangerous and you're safe with pasteurized milk." Well, there's 20 to 30 deaths per year in this country from anaphylactic shock from milk. It is the most common allergy, and it can be deadly. So if you're talking about statistics, you need to include that one.
You're saying because we pasteurize and homogenize the milk, it's so allergenic that it's causing anaphylactic shock and death.
Some people, yes.
Wow.
And for sure, it's fewer and fewer people are drinking or using ultra pasteurized milk because we know that because the consumption is declining at 1 to 3% per year. It gives the kids a tummy ache, and so you're not going to give it to them. And it's many people say they're lactose intolerant, and it's really pasteurization intolerant.
I love that. It's such a bummer too, because the organic brands are the ones who utilize UHT because they're so far and few between. They need to ship their stuff further and longer.
And this is with the consolidation of the industry. That's why they've gone to this. And also, and I wrote an article on this recently, pasteurization wasn't working. They had a couple of really big outbreaks from these confinement dairies in 1985, 1986. And everything seemed to have been done perfectly. The pasteurization worked, but people still got sick. Lots of people got sick, like 200,000 people got sick from one outbreak.
Wow.
So pasteurization wasn't working. And they then went to the ultra pasteurization, which totally deadens the milk. Most people don't realize that you don't have to refrigerate ultra pasteurized milk. In Europe, it's just sitting in these little boxes, aseptic boxes, in the aisles of the supermarket. But Americans wouldn't buy that. They thought, well, milk needs to be fresh, it needs to be cold. So what they did is package it exactly like pasteurized milk and sell it in the refrigerator case. And you wouldn't buy it if it were just sitting on the floor in the supermarket or on a shelf.
Yeah, that's so true.
Mhm.
Let's talk about some of the protective measures or naturally inherent protective elements in raw milk. Okay.
Yes,
Like some of the things that even if there were something to enter the milk, what is there
yes.
in the milk that can help? It almost has like its own immune system. So break that down
Well,
for me.
exactly. And remember, this milk is what's fed, what baby cows get, pigs, cats, and these are not very sanitary conditions of these animals. And so milk has what we call antimicrobial components. In fact, if you add something like E. coli or E. coli 0157H7 or any of these so-called pathogens to raw milk and then measure each day, it goes down. So they don't proliferate in raw milk, whereas they would proliferate in any other food. And that's because raw milk contains these components, two enzymes in particular, lactoferrin and lactoperoxidase, which they just kill pathogens. And a pathogenic bacteria is different from a non-pathogenic bacteria. And they know the difference. They get the bad guys, but not the good guys. And then there's a number of other components that strengthen the gut wall that help the body reject any impurities, bad actors, and no other food is like this. And of course, all of these components are destroyed by pasteurization.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I've heard explained is that raw milk can help facilitate our body's production of lactase to help break down the
Yes,
lactose,
yes,
which I think if more people understood, they would realize that, oh, all your quote lactose intolerance or your tummy troubles is because of I love what you said, pasteurization
innovation
problem.
intolerance. Yeah, yeah. We actually paid for a survey, and we found that 82% of people diagnosed as lactose intolerant could consume raw milk without any problem at all. Now,
Wow.
it wasn't 100%, it was 82%.
Hmm.
So there is a small number of people, or a small fraction, maybe 18%, who just can't do any kind of dairy.
Mm.
We need to recognize that. But most people can do raw milk just fine.
And have you found in your research that a tolerance to lactose is something that we can kind of build up over time?
Yes, I think we do. Yes. And
Okay.
I think there was an interesting paper. The descendants of people who drank fresh milk had much higher lactose intolerance than the descendants of people who were drinking fermented milk. And the fermented milk, they get rid of the lactose. The milk goes from sweet to sour.
Mm-hmm.
So someone from Switzerland, whose ancestors were from Switzerland or Great Britain, would probably have a high tolerance
Mm-hmm.
for milk.
So if someone is struggling with their digestion of even raw milk, is fermented milk, like maybe a kefir or yogurt, the next
Yes,
best thing?
exactly. Or cheese.
Or cheese?
Yeah,
That's
they
wonderful.
can tolerate that much better. Although the problem with cheese is they're using what's called vegetarian rennet, which is produced by genetically modified bacteria. And a lot of people just can't tolerate that. They can tolerate the cheese made with animal rennet, as most cheeses in Europe are made with animal rennet, but not in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've read like 98% of all cheese made in the US is made with that vegetable,
Yeah, rennet.
GMO
Yeah, it's
derived.
genetically modified. It was the first use for genetically modified bacteria.
Wow.
Okay, so I want to explore that a little bit. I don't even know what is that? So this is something to help make the cheese?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Cultures cheese?
hard cheeses and semi-hard cheeses go through a second fermentation. The first fermentation is when you add the cultures,
Mm.
And that starts the fermentation process. And then after an hour or so, you add the rennet, and that's the second fermentation process. And the rennet separates the milk into curds and whey. And traditionally, it comes from the forestomach of a calf who's never had anything but mother's milk. And they kill the calf, and this is why cheese-consuming cultures tend to eat a lot of veal. And then they take the stomach and soak it to get this enzyme out called rennet.
Remember when we had Dr. Bill Schindler
Just gonna say
on the
that.
show, and he explained how they would literally kill this calf after it just had milk and basically eat the cheese out of the
They
stomach?
would tie the stomach up, and it would ferment in the stomach.
He's amazing.
And they would pull the cheese out, and I was like, "That is insane."
It's
But this
burned into Jeff's
It's
brain.
called the abosamen.
Yes.
The forestomach is called the abosamen.
Yeah, it's wild.
Okay, so this rennet is like a bacteria that gives it an additional stage of fermentation to separate the curds and the whey, and that's how we make hard cheeses. So would a mozzarella then be something that's only a one stage?
I think it's a two-stage, although mozzarella is made from the whey.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how to make mozzarella, I have to say.
Understood. Yeah, me either. So, okay, right on. That makes sense to me.
Okay, so we covered raw dairy. Now this next category combines these two, fats and dairy. We've got them both wrong, but it's commercial infant formula. I'd love for you to share the scandal of infant formula and what we can use instead.
So where can I start? Infant formulas, you would assume that science has figured out, here's how we make the formula to come as close to mother's milk as possible. And one of the really key components of mother's milk is cholesterol. The baby can't make cholesterol. It needs to get cholesterol in its food. And cholesterol is just critical for hormone production, for building the brain, and for gut health, all kinds of things. I mean, the cholesterol is essential, and that's why mother's milk is very rich in cholesterol and has special enzymes that ensure the assimilation of 100% of that cholesterol. Commercial infant formula contains no cholesterol. It's skim milk and vegetable oils. So there's no cholesterol there. There's no animal fat there. Now, if you buy milk replacer for calves, the third ingredient is animal fats, because they know that these calves need cholesterol to grow and develop normally. And if the calf needed it, the human being with its much more complex brain certainly needs it. But they don't put animal fat in infant formula. Years ago, someone from the formula industry told Mary Enig, my co-author, she said, we know that there should be cholesterol in these formulas, but we dare not put it there because the industry has spent so much effort saying that cholesterol is bad, and we can't suddenly put it in the infant formula. So yeah, and also the butterfat in the milk, it doesn't bring the industry much money if we just give it to babies or children. Where they get the money off the butterfat is to put it in ice cream. And they get at least 5 times more for the butterfat if they put it in ice cream than if they just leave it in the milk.
Wow.
And yeah, it's like $5 per pound versus $25 per pound.
Jeez.
And so this is what I call the best of intentions diet. Somebody tries to be good all day and they have low-fat breakfast, skim milk, low-fat lunch, low-fat dinner, no butter, no meat fats. And by 8 o'clock at night, the body is just starving for fats. And you go to the freezer and you take out a quart of ice cream and you eat the whole thing in one go standing up. It's how starving your body is for fats. And that's what they want. This is a policy created by accountants, not by dietitians or nutritionists or anybody who cares about your child. They just care about the bottom line. So this is why skim milk, whole milk is forbidden in the public schools. I mean, this is cast in concrete. It is a federal law that you cannot give whole milk to children in the schools. That tells
Wow.
you something about our culture and our society. We have completely gone off the rails. We are a culture that pretends to love children, and we're actually starving them to death and creating infertility and all kinds of misery and unhappiness because we're not giving them what they need.
Yeah, that's awful. I was recently in the baby aisle just browsing and I flipped over a formula carton that was soy based.
Yeah,
And
well,
Sally, it was so frightening. It was the second ingredient was vegetable oils. It was corn syrup as the sugars. I mean, they won't even put lactose in this stuff. They're
yeah,
using corn
too
syrup.
expensive. Too expensive.
And
Now, Gerber's used to make a liver formula, meat formula, for kids who couldn't do the milk formula. But they found the soy and they stopped the meat formula. And the soy is a total poison. A baby on soy based formula has 13,000 to 22,000 times higher circulating estrogen in its bloodstream than a baby on milk based formula.
wow.
And babies are programmed, especially little boys, are programmed the first 6 months of life. They have testosterone levels the same as an adult male, and that programs them to express adult male characteristics at puberty.
Mm,
And this is not happening for these kids who are on soy based formula. It affects their brains, it affects their digestion, affects the thyroid gland too.
that's awful. And for a lot of these parents, they're going to a pediatrician saying, I can't breastfeed for whatever reason, and they seem to react to this milk-based formula, and their next thing is this hypoallergenic or this
Mhm.
soy-based or this
So
whatever.
common.
With hydrolyzed protein.
Yes,
Yeah. So
it's
that's going to be a
really
lot of MSG that affects their brains, affects the hypothalamus. They're very likely to have a weight problem when they grow older.
mm,
Now, I know what your next question is what do you recommend? Because there
mhm,
definitely are women who have trouble breastfeeding or who don't want to breastfeed. And I'm not being critical. That's your choice. That's fine. But you want to give your child something that will help him grow normally and be healthy for him. And the obvious choice after breast milk is raw breast milk, is the raw milk from another species of animal. And that's what humankind did for thousands of years. They've actually found little gourds with leather nipples on them in graves, pre Christian graves. And there's sheep milk residue inside the bottle. So this is what they've been doing for thousands of years, and the human race survived this. So,
mm,
but now we've got this campaign telling moms that if you give raw milk to your kids, it'll kill them. So, but anyway, Mary and I came up with this formula recipe. It's in the book Nourishing Traditions. It's on our website, westonaprice.org, and we think at least 20,000 babies have grown up on this formula, started life on this formula with uniformly good results.
mm. And what are some of the components of this homemade formula?
Well, it's raw milk and also separated whey from preferably from raw milk, and lactose. We add cream, we add cod liver oil, we add extra vitamin C and a few oils. All is to bring it up to the profile that's similar to mother's milk.
Mhm. Yeah, I for our last two kids, I had for our middle, she was about 4 months old, struggled with eczema, C-section baby. This is how I first found the Weston A Price Foundation, is because I needed a solution, something to feed her.
Yeah,
And I never forget telling Joey, hey, I'm going to not only start buying raw milk, and we're in Ohio, so that's kind of a herd share
yeah,
situation,
yeah.
but also
Good.
I'm going to give it to our kid, and I'm going to give her this formula that I'm going to make in a pot on the stove and feed it to her in these glass bottles. And he was so kind, and he was very gracious and let me make that decision. But I'm telling you, Sally, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made as a parent.
And how
So
do you
I still
do?
remember those days. Oh, she thrived. Her
Yeah, they,
symptoms
they, they
her
love it.
symptoms
Yeah,
went And she begged for it. Of course, it smells kind of bad, and it kind of gets gelatinous when you put it in the fridge because it has some gelatin in it, and so it's like this fishy, from the cod liver oil. But I'm telling you, even our nanny was like, "What is this stuff?" And I was like, "Trust me, it's better than what's at the store, okay?" And it was just, again, I tell everyone, I preach it. I'm like an evangelist for this formula because it was so life changing. And then for our last, we switched her to raw milk at like 10 months just to be supplemental. And again, she thrived, and it's been game changing for us. So I love
Did
that.
you tell your pediatrician?
No, I did
Yeah,
not.
don't tell them. They'll take your baby away. I mean, I just shouldn't laugh, but
Yeah.
they're so shocked by this idea that you could give raw milk to your baby. Of course, breast milk is raw milk, so.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that recently had a baby, and they were talking about how, man, my child, he's just so colicky and he's always spitting up, and we've got him on this hypoallergenic formula, and we're going to the pediatrician, and we're doing everything, and it's just nothing is happening. And my kids are older, and he asked me, we were on a run together, and he was like, did you ever encounter that? And I'm like, I was like, yeah, we figured it out. He's like, what'd you guys do? I'm like, you really want to know? And he was like, yeah. I was like, well, we made our own baby formula, and it was like, all right, yeah. Like very quickly, he was like, I don't want to talk to this guy about this anymore.
I know.
It was almost like, he's like, Joey, he's like, why would you want to chance it with something that, it feels so delicate? And I was like, well, I mean, I feel like you're chancing it no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And just because something is packaged in a grocery store with an approval sticker on it, I'm like, this is my kid. I'll put an approval sticker on the bottle that I feed my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so Elizabeth, the way that she put the approval sticker on is that when she made it, she drank it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that was kind of the way that that's what she told me. She's like, hey, I'm making this. We're gonna do it, and I'm gonna drink it first. And I was like, all right, well,
I drank it. It was good.
I was like, all right, you keel over. I guess we know. Like, hey, don't give that to the kids. So.
Oh man,
Good
yeah.
times.
So, and I think one of the things that was so helpful for me is one, what did we do before the commercial formula industry really took off? And two, having Mary Innig as this PhD who really was able to break down breast milk and its nutritional components and then match that so beautifully. And you guys explain exactly why everything is in it. Now, I have had some people recently, because of their intense avoidance of all quote seed oils, they will make the formula, but they'll completely leave out the sunflower oil. And I wanted to know what you think about that, because I know it's in
you
there.
can leave it out. I don't think it's that serious, but yeah, the seed oils are very bad. But there's this point of view that you shouldn't have any omega-6 at all in your diet, and that's just not correct. We always get some in our diet, and mother's milk tends to be fairly high in it, like 6% of the fatty acids. So that's why we add it. And I think, as Mary explained it to me, the baby needs the omega-6 for growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That makes sense. And so that formula recipe, for anyone who's interested, like Sally said, is in her book, Nourishing Traditions, but it's also on your website and your blog, so you can access that. I believe Sarah Pope does a YouTube video on it too, big tutorial.
Yes, she shows how to make it. And then the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and child care, and has all the questions and answers, everything.
Yes, we have that one too.
I never knew that cholesterol was a critical need for an infant until like 10 minutes ago.
Is. See, the infant got very immature digestive system, and they can't make a lot of enzymes. They can't make cholesterol. Yeah, so they need to get these in their food. Now, human beings can make cholesterol. That's how badly we need it, by the way. So the body makes it. It has
adults can, you're saying?
Yes, adults can make it. But all the most delicious foods in the world contain cholesterol in them, so you shouldn't worry about eating it.
So I want to bridge into the next category, which I'm actually veering from our notes a bit, but it's the maternal advice for nutrition, either around fertility or during pregnancy. I think we get this so wrong in the United States. So I'd love to hear your perspective of which foods support optimal baby growth and fertility.
Well, it's the traditional diet. As for fertility, there was a very interesting study out of Harvard by a man named Chavarro, working with women who were infertile, who couldn't get pregnant, and they put half of them on a diet that contained butter and whole milk and yogurt and cheese, and they got pregnant.
Wow.
Whereas the women following the low-fat diet couldn't get pregnant.
Mm.
And this was very embarrassing to them because they've been preaching the, no animal fat for so long. And so they said, well, if you can't get pregnant, do this diet with the butterfat in it. And as soon as you get pregnant, you go back to your low-fat diet. Now, it's just such horrible, such tragic advice, because don't you think the diet that helps us get pregnant is the same kind of diet we need for the healthy development of your child? And your body is very wise, and it's not going to let you get pregnant if you're, doesn't have some assurance that you're going to eat this way afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And all the traditional foods for fertility and healthy babies in traditional cultures were animal foods rich in fat: liver, fish eggs, butter, egg yolks, pork, pork fat, bird fat, goose fat, and duck fat were also valued for fertility.
Mm.
So the other thing that just floors me is telling pregnant women not to eat salt and not to give salt to their babies. You need salt. Your baby needs salt for development. You need salt for hormone production. You need salt for healthy bones. You need salt for digestion. You need salt for the brain development. You need salt for the production of hydrochloric acid. It's just goes on and on. And to be telling women to avoid salt is, again, it's genocide. It's just completely wrong.
Mm-hmm. Now, which types of salt do you recommend? Because I know there's a
Well,
difference.
we recommend an unrefined salt, rich in minerals and without the chemicals that they use for refining. The main one is aluminum, which is very toxic.
Mm.
Apparently, I didn't see this, but somebody in our office said there was a big, scary article came out telling parents or people not to use unrefined salt because it has heavy metals in it. And he said he read the whole article and he looked at all their charts, and he said even the charts that they point to in this article did not show high levels of heavy metals. They're tiny trace amounts that are not going to harm you. Whereas the refined salt that this article was recommending is quite high in aluminum, which is very toxic.
Mm. And that's because of how they refine it. They use aluminum in that process?
Yes, they use aluminum. Aluminum makes the salt pour when it rains. So you're probably too young for this, but when we used to go to my grandmother's house, we didn't have salt in salt shakers. We had it in little bowls with little salt spoons. And that's how we put salt on our food, because in the old days, the salt was not refined and it would clog up the salt shakers.
Mm-hmm.
And when she says pour when it rains, there's a humidity factor. So it would clump up more if it was humid outside. I love that. That's super good.
We have our salt in bowls with little spoons.
But that's because I went to culinary school and I'm a chef. And so I just grew very accustomed to using my fingers to salt my food.
Right.
And shaking a shaker just feels very uncontrolled. And I'm like, I can't do this.
Well, it's a lot of work.
And the salt we use is unrefined. So it actually has higher moisture.
Our salt would never work in a shaker.
Yeah.
There's no way. Now, what about this red salt? That tends to be a little bit drier, right?
Oh, like Himalayan
the red salts are
salt?
high in iron. So it'd be good for anemia.
Interesting. Those are the ones I think
red
I've heard
are iron.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard everyone says, oh, those are high in lead, and I never know what to think about it. So I just gave it up, and I thought, I don't know, I'll use the other kind of unrefined salt. But as Sally's saying, there's some dispute there, so I'll have to look into that.
I think they're all fine.
You think they're all fine? Oh, well, Sally says it. Everyone hear it. Okay, so I'd love to get into moving again. So you're saying the animal-based foods are wonderful for optimal nutrition during pregnancy and fertility. We're talking egg yolks, we're talking whole milk, raw cream.
Raw whole milk, cream, butter, and then we also recommend pureed liver as the first food for babies. Pureed liver and egg yolks, because they're two extremely nutrient-dense foods and they're high in cholesterol. Egg yolks are the highest cholesterol food, and liver comes close behind.
Is there any variance from livers from different animals?
Yes. So the ruminant livers, like beef liver and calf's liver, is very high in vitamin A, but low in vitamin D.
Hmm.
And traditionally, the calf's liver was cooked in lard to give you a balance of A and D. I prefer the bird livers, duck, chicken, duck, goose, turkey liver is good too, because they have a really nice balance of A, D, and K. They're really the perfect food for a baby.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know. And goose
And,
liver
and
is
they're
like,
milder. They don't taste as strong as beef liver.
imagine we start serving our baby foie gras on a regular basis.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Luxurious.
Well, I'm trying to think here. We have a lot of venison liver. That's got to be similar to a cow because it's a ruminant.
Yeah,
right?
so
Deer?
it would be very high in vitamin A, and you would want to balance that by cooking it in lard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
We have access to a lot of venison liver.
What are you saying? You hunt it. You do a good job.
It's just not like we have like pounds of it in the freezer, you know?
No, but we do have quite a bit of cow.
Get it.
Okay, anyways. Okay, so I'm loving this. So two big, huge despairs. Just what word am I thinking of? Differences, right? So feeding your baby egg yolk and liver is totally different than feeding them that horrible little flaked cereal.
Rice cereal. Yeah.
Oh, it's awful. And then also eating all of these rich in cholesterol and fat foods when you're pregnant, you'd think, oh no, I'm going to gain too much weight or whatever. And it's exactly what your baby needs. So I love, this is why you say.
You won't gain, you're supposed to gain 30 pounds, but you won't gain too much weight. The next thing we really need to focus on is sugar and the huge amounts of refined sweeteners that Americans eat. And I just wrote a blog on this. There was a study in 2020, so it's a new study. And they got these rats hooked on sugar water in their cages. And then they fed them a diet that was 40% lard. And the rats did not go to the sugar water anymore. And the researchers have said, oh, this is terrible. The rats don't want their sweet, palatable foods anymore. But for people struggling with a sugar addiction, and I'm very sympathetic to this because I was a sugarholic in my youth, isn't it good to know if you eat a lot of animal fats, your cravings for sugar will go away? And we've had lots of testimonials on this. And you want to get to the point where it's not willpower. It's where your body says, I don't want this. And it's not a big struggle to not eat the sugar. And the way to do that is with the animal fats. And there's a perfectly good scientific explanation for this. Sugar raises dopamine, but animal fats also raise dopamine. And if you're starving yourself and avoiding butter, avoiding eggs, not eating liver, then you're going to be starved for dopamine. And of course, sugar is going to make you feel good and it becomes addictive.
Now, I'm going to say something really controversial here, but speaking from my own experience as a teenager, I had an eating disorder. I was bulimic. And when the foods you binge on are highly sugar filled, right? Because you're you starve yourself all day and you want this sugar.
Yes.
And in all of my treatment and my dietitians and everything, if people would have explained to me, like, Liz, your brain, one, is starved for nutrients. Two, the reason you have this binge craving is because you're chemically wired to crave that. And you can counteract that by eating satiating whole real foods.
Yes.
That would have changed my life. But guess what? No one told me that. And instead it was like, Liz, face your fear foods. You should be okay eating the cookie, eat the cake on your birthday. It's good. It's fine. Just don't throw up after. And I say that all very lightly because, I'm 15 years past that and, went through a whole treatment thing. But it gets me every time I hear you talk about these satiating traditional foods of how if we had facilities that could support these women who are confused and teenagers and, struggling chemically in their brains because of this dopamine fluctuation, we could substitute and we could have really amazing outcomes and it wouldn't be
eat
this
a piece of salami, eat cheese and butter. Yeah. And you'll eat less because it's very satisfying. And little by little, it won't happen overnight, but little by little, the cravings will go away.
Now, what if your kids are they're eating a lot of fruit and they desire fruit before bed, or it's maybe there's a comforting of, we don't do a ton of refined sugar, if hardly any, in our house.
No.
But I will see them gravitate towards fruit often.
Mhm.
And just curious what you think about that.
What fruit? I mean, different fruits have different effects. The fruits high in pectin, like apples, pears, peaches, plums, pectin can really do a job on your intestines, and they should be cooked. They should be, steamed or cooked in butter or whatever, and then they're much more digestible. And you've got the butter or the cream or whatever you put on these cooked fruits to keep them from causing this blood sugar roller coaster. So and then tropical fruits don't need to be cooked. They're not high pectin foods.
This is like mangoes, pineapples,
Yes.
passion fruits. Okay.
And I find it's quite interesting because I don't like tropical fruits very much. Maybe a little pineapple, but I'm not attracted to them at all. And my husband eats tropical fruit every day. He just loves it. He grew up in New Zealand and they had a lot of it. And one thing tropical fruits are good for is digesting proteins. There was one tribe that Dr. Price found who never ate meat without bananas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So again, though, they're sweet. They're very sweet, and I just wouldn't overdo on them. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think if you buy a digestive enzyme, it usually comes from a papaya, if I'm correct. So
or pineapple.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then berries, I believe, are kind of a safer, maybe lower glycemic impact on your blood sugar. So berries are just so expensive, so that's kind of a harder one. But I didn't realize that about the apples.
Butter cooked apples, easier on the gut. I'm interested.
Yeah, I made a lot of applesauce for my kids when they were growing up, and we always had it with cream, and they loved that. So
applesauce, I totally forgot about that.
So smart.
Yeah, it's a great example. All right, my final one as we wrap up here is America's what do we call it? Anti-meat campaign. Their war against meat. What do we do about this?
Eat meat. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to change this from the top. The only way we're going to change this is from the bottom, and that means we have to wise up and realize what they're doing. And one of the reasons they want to get rid of meat is because the profit on meat is so much lower than the profit on plant-based foods. It's hugely different. So, and meat is, especially beef, the two foods they don't want us to consume are beef and raw milk. And it's interesting for me because these are two foods very high in zinc. We don't get many other places. And zinc is the intelligence mineral. And zinc keeps us mentally stable. I had a friend who had to eat red meat with every meal or he went crazy. He had some kind of zinc problem, and he just had to have red meat with every meal. He couldn't function. And we're in a society that's crazy. I mean, everybody's crazy. They're violent. They're, can't think straight. They're fighting. We need more zinc in the diet. And where do we get it? We get it red meat and milk, raw milk. And the plant-based diet, there's no zinc there. Maybe in a few plants, but it's blocked by phytic acid. And the quickest way to develop a zinc deficiency is to go on a plant-based diet.
Wow.
So I was on a long, I run marathons, so I run long distance. And I was on a run with a group of guys like a couple of days ago. And we were running 18 miles together. And so we had a lot of time to talk. And so a lot of conversations come up. And one of which was one of the guys that we were running with has qualified for the Boston Marathon a number of times. And he's an extremely fit athlete. And he was going on and on about how he's been vegan for 4 years and how he's been vegan for 4 years. And he was talking about how this he believes it's possibly one of the reasons why he's been able to perform so well is because as he would say it, he eats so clean. And it's something because that's an example of I'm on the run. I didn't say anything. I just ran and I was like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm not going to get into a pissing match here because one, he would outrun me. So that's the first thing. I'm not going to be able to outrun him. And two, no one in that group was really excited to hear what I had to say about, hey, you know what? I just took like liver supplements and ate eggs and bacon before this run. So we're in complete opposite scenarios. Just curious what your thoughts are.
Broth in your thermos.
There you go.
Well, contact me in 5 years and let me know if he's still running.
Yeah.
Probably the way he's nourishes himself is off his own body. And that's what happens. You cannibalize your flesh, and human flesh apparently is very nutritious. But let's see what we're doing in 5 years. If you're still running and he's still running.
That's a good test. You mentioned broth really quick, and I've heard you mention that broth can kind of be just like the mood stabilizer. If you need an upper, if you need a downer.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
why is that?
It stabilizes dopamine levels. If they're too high, it brings them down. If they're too low, it brings them up. And I'll just tell you a story. I came home the other day. I had a long day at the office. I'd been shopping, and I felt like I was getting food sickness. I ran to the bathroom a couple times. And I pulled some broth out of the freezer and heated it up and had a mug of that broth. Oh, and I felt very, very tired. It's uncharacteristic, not like me. So I pulled the broth out of the freezer and heated it up, had a mug of broth with a generous pinch of salt in it. And I tell you, in 10 minutes, I was a new person.
Wow.
My gut had settled down. I didn't feel tired. I felt like I could prepare dinner. To me, it's just a magic food. And you can't buy it. I mean, a few places sell frozen broth, but it's expensive. And we really need to get a slow cooker and make your own broth.
What are the elements what are the elements in the broth that give it that mood boosting?
Well, number one is glycine. It's the main amino acid in broth, and the glycine is the dopamine regulator. Glycine is very helpful for digestion. It's very good for your joints and sinews and connective tissue. And then there's other ones too, other amino acids, but glycine is the main one.
It's funny because every time I hear you talk about traditional foods, it's almost like what you're eating is in direct support of the same part of your body. Like you eat eggs for your fertility, right? You drink broth for your joints.
Exactly. And traditional cultures, if they had a blindness, they would eat the flesh behind the eye of the fish.
Wow.
If they ate, if they didn't have dairy cows or dairy animals, they ground up the bones of fish and little animals and birds and ate those for their own bones. And it just makes sense. If they killed an animal, they always ate the liver. The liver was the seat of life. That's why it's called a liver, okay? And they knew that was the strengthening organ that gave them a lot of energy.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom there. That's why I love that. Sally, can you tell people where they can connect with the foundation, please?
Okay. So the foundation's website is westоnaprice.org. And it's a huge website. If you go on the right-hand nav bar, there's a tour. If you're new to the website, take the tour first. We have local chapters. We have over 400 local chapters. So if you want to get in touch with a like-minded group, contact your nearest local chapter. They're listed on the website. They also have local food lists, sources for raw milk, and so forth. We have a lot of interesting materials. We have a podcast, and we have a yearly conference. Our conference this year will be in October 25th through 27th in Orlando. And we have a terrific program this year. We're just getting it all organized.
Wonderful.
And yes, and then if you were looking for raw milk, we have a website called realmilk.com. And my own blog is nourishingtraditions.com.
Wonderful. Sally, you are the queen of resourcing people when it comes to traditional dietary wisdom. I'm so thankful for your work. I'm so thankful you took time out today to chat with us about America's biggest dietary pitfalls, because, man, we have a lot. So thank you so much for coming on, Sally.
Thanks, Liz. And thanks, Joey. Thanks so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Have a great day. And with that, the Sally Fallon has left the virtual chat.
Epic episode. You guys heard it here first. All salt's fine. Okay. I trust her. I don't know. I trust her. I've heard her speak in so many different venues that I'm just like, yes, okay. Wonderful.
I'm going to have to reach out to Kelsey about running and just be like, yo, you ever drank broth on a run?
I kind of think that could be like the mystery ingredient, because if you think about it, it's super hydrating. It's going to give you electrolytes. It's going to give you some protein.
Yeah, but here's my thought. I've never had broth cold. And I've also never been like running and been like,
what if you turned the broth into like gummies?
Yo.
Is that too much work?
No, I mean, that would be lit.
Should we do that?
If I had like broth gummies, that would be...
Guys, go to shopthh.com. You'll find these broth gummies. No, I'm just kidding.
Holy smokes.
I'm just kidding.
That's kind of a crazy idea.
Should we experiment before your marathon?
What would we do?
We'd add gelatin to it, and you'd probably want it flavored, right? Unless you'd want it savory.
I mean, here's what I would like. I would like to do like a salty rosemary situation.
Maybe some lemon.
Yeah.
All right, we can figure this out off air. Anyways, Sally Fallon.
Figured out right here.
No, please don't. Sally Fallon was amazing, you guys. She's obviously been a huge influencer in my life. Very thankful for her work. I've talked about her a million times on the show. Looking at a bunch of her books right now on my bookshelf. Words cannot express how much of a pioneer she is in this real food space. So super cool to have her on and just get her hot take on all of the ways that America has messed up our nutritional advice. So any other thoughts?
When we wrote the first curriculum for kids, we worked with Sally Fallon to kind of help us proofread that document.
Yeah, she edited it in a way, not like proofread, but she went through and was like, hey, this is what I
would recommend here. Here's some different facts that you should know. And so I just say that of, when we talk about how we created these nutrition curriculum for kids, it's not like we just sat down and said, well, we want to sell something, so let's write it. It was, let's do a ton of research. Let's reach out to the most well-researched and sourced people that we know to help us create the most educational and correct resource we possibly can.
Yeah, I actually delayed the launch a year so that I could put in Sally's edits. I think she went through the book 3 different times. Just from she's a very particular woman.
It got down to like,
she's a detailed woman.
The meat picture you have in this page
I had to
doesn't have enough fat.
I changed the cover. You guys, I could go on.
So much. Anyways, super gracious. So I wanted to call that out
I forgot about that.
Thanks to her, because she did that just in her own time. And she's an extremely busy person. And we're super thankful for Sally. And I think that's an easy segue into some of the ways that we, aside from this podcast, are trying to support all of you that are listening.
Yeah.
The first and foremost would be with curriculum, with books, with content that we've created to take you further. So listening to this long form podcast episode is one way to inspire, equip, and educate you, right? And one of the ways that we really hone in on the equipping side and the education side is in written materials. So get on to homegrowneducation.org and check those books out. If you didn't know that we have those books, and you're just missing out.
They're in the closet right there behind you.
Yeah. So get after it.
Printed.
Get printed. Get on there. Get yourself a book. Get yourself a book for your kids. We're trying to get our kids to understand nutrition from a young age so that we can break some of these generational things. That's kind of the mission here. So get those books for your kids. Get the books for you. We got all kinds of stuff on there. We've also started a site where we're selling products and goods to help you have less pain in the home goods section of the grocery store. Now, we don't have everything, but maybe someday we will. And right now, we've got all kinds of things for you at shopthh.com. So everything from coffee and tea to lard dish soap that is just free of all kinds of synthetics. We've got proofing baskets for your sourdough. We've got all kinds of sourdough tools that we've not only found products that we believe are just great and that we source and bring into a localized place on our website, but we've also innovated some things. Our proofing baskets are just better. They just are better. We've also got the bread box.
It's back.
If you're storing your bread in a plastic bag, your sourdough, we're probably in the sourdough game if you listen to this. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're not in the sourdough game. But if you are, and you're storing your sourdough in a plastic bag, man, that's tough. And we prototyped, we sat down with carpenters and built these boxes to allow the appropriate amount of airflow so that bread would not go stale, but also not mold.
Also the size. We had to adjust the size 3 different times for this box, because if you make 1,000-gram loaf of bread, meaning you're using 1,000 grams of flour, you know these are huge, either boules or batards of this bread. And so that shape doesn't fit in a regular bread box, even a handcrafted one you'd find on Etsy. It just doesn't fit. And I was like, well, if every bread that I'm baking doesn't fit in the bread box, why would I buy the bread box? So we had to expand that, and then we had to shift the other proportions so that it looked right. Otherwise, it would just look really wonky. We wanted this top shelf that also had this removable cutting board. We wanted the whole thing to be maple. We wanted it to be sealed in non-toxic oil. The whole thing was thought through. We had multiple iterations. Even the one on our counter is a prototype.
Dude, I was like researching the amount of research I did into like wood curing, and oh my gosh, insanity. These things are built, the purpose of these, why we built them, and why we over-engineered them so much, because they are absolutely over-engineered. We could have done it so much cheaper. Is that we're kind of sick and tired of buying things and then like, that's just for you.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite things in my house are things that were passed down to me. And I want to get back to a day where you're using a cast iron pan that you remember using as a kid. This is the pan I learned how to make eggs in, and it's better now than it was then. And this bread box is going to be that.
Yep, it's an heirloom quality piece, and we really, really wanted it to be that. So anyways, this is not a podcast about bread box, but we love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Another way you can support us is by leaving a rating or review of the show. It really, really helps push our show to the explore page for other folks to find it and find this information. And as you know, we're kind of in an uphill battle, kind of going against the political dietary recommended advice. So for us to even be as high as we are in the nutrition category is amazing.
It's thanks to you guys, because you've been getting after it. So
thank you.
Keep it rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and if you want to hear more from us, because man, you just haven't heard me talk about a bread box enough. Elizabeth is over here dying. Land the plane, she's saying.
Land the plane.
You can find us on Instagram. Elizabeth is at Liz Hazelmeyer. We're at Homegrown_education. And I'm at Joey Hazelmeyer. Our Hazelmeyer Goods, Shop the H, has an Instagram page. You can follow that. Check it out. Learn things from that. And until next time, friends, that's a wrap.